Indianapolis, Indiana. June 26th, 1977. 8:47 in the evening. Market Square Arena is packed with 18,000 people who do not know what they are about to witness. They know they are here to see Elvis Presley. They know the show has been on for 40 minutes. They know the band is tight and the sound system is good. And Elvis, despite everything the rumors say, despite everything the photographs in the tabloids suggest Elvis is performing, he is moving. He is connecting with the crowd in the way he always has. In the specific way that made him Elvis rather than simply a very famous singer. What they do not know is that they are watching the last concert Elvis Presley will ever give. And what they cannot know, what none of them sitting in the dark of that arena with their programs and their anticipation and their love for this man can possibly know, is that sometime in the next hour, Elvis Aaron Presley is going to stop in the middle of a song and look out at 18,000 people and cry. Not the staged emotion of a performer giving the audience what they came for. Not the calculated vulnerability of a star who understands that tears equal connection, real crying. The kind that arrives without permission, that happens to a person rather than being performed by them. The kind that tells the truth when everything else has been managing it. To understand that moment, to understand what it cost and what it meant, you have to understand what Elvis was carrying into that arena on June 26th. The weight was considerable. His health had been declining for years in ways that the people around him could see clearly and that the public only beginning to understand through photographs that got out despite the efforts of management to control them. The prescription medications that had begun after his mother died in 1958 had accumulated over 2 decades into a dependency that his doctors managed but could not reverse. He was 42 years old and his body was bearing the evidence of it. But it was not only the physical weight. There was something else Elvis had been carrying through those final months that the people close to him describe with consistent language, a knowledge, a particular awareness that settled over him in the quiet moments in the dressing room before shows, in the car between venues, in the late-night hours at Graceland when the house was finally still. An awareness that something was ending. He had said things, not dramatically, not in the way of someone making a speech or preparing a final message. Just in conversation, in the casual way that important things sometimes get said precisely because neither person is treating them as important. He had told his girlfriend, Ginger Alden, 2 weeks before Indianapolis, that he was tired in a way that sleeping didn't fix. He had told his cousin Billy Smith that he wanted to spend more time with Lisa Marie. He had called several old friends, people he hadn't spoken to in months, sometimes years, for no apparent reason other than to talk, to check in, to say hello. The people who received those calls understood their significance only afterward. The show at Market Square Arena on June 26th began at 8 in the evening. Elvis came on stage in the white jumpsuit, the costume that had become his uniform, the rhinestones, and the eagle embroidery that the whole world recognized. The crowd response was enormous. 18,000 people on their feet immediately, the sound of it filling the arena like something physical. Elvis stood at the microphone and felt it. He always felt it. Whatever else was failing, whatever the medications were doing to his system, whatever the weight of the years was doing to his body, when he stood at the microphone and felt 18,000 people respond to his presence, something in him still answered, still lit up, still knew exactly what to do. He opened with Also Sprach Zarathustra, the fanfare that had opened every show of his Vegas and touring years, the signal to the crowd that the king had arrived. Then he moved into the first songs of the set. See Rider, I Got a Woman, the familiar architecture of a concert that had been performed hundreds of times. He was good that night. The musicians say this consistently, and it matters. Because the narrative of Elvis's final concert sometimes suggests a performance in obvious decline, a man barely holding on. That is not what happened. What happened was a man performing with the tools available to him, impaired, yes, not at his peak, yes, but present, engaged, giving the audience something real. It was midway through the set, approximately 40 minutes in, that things changed. Elvis was singing Unchained Melody. He had added it to his setlist only recently. It was not a song that had been part of his repertoire for long, and the version he had begun performing was spare and devastating. Just Elvis at the piano. No band orchestration. Nothing between his voice and the audience. He sat at the piano. He began to play. The first verse came out clean. The voice that had been doing remarkable things for 23 years. The voice that was still capable, even in those final months, of moments that made people stop everything they were doing. The voice was there. And then, somewhere in the second verse, something happened. The musicians describe it differently in different interviews, but they all describe the same underlying event. Something shifted in Elvis's face, something that had been held back. Held back for how long? Through how many performances? Through how many nights broke through? His voice caught. Not technically, not in the way voices catch when the mechanics fail. It caught the way voices catch when something is happening to the person, making the sound that has nothing to do with mechanics. He kept singing. He did not stop. But his eyes, which had been moving across the crowd in the way they always did during a performance, connecting, reading, engaging, his eyes changed. They went somewhere more internal, more private. And then, quietly, without drama, without announcement, tears began moving down his face. 18,000 people saw it happen. The arena went very quiet. Not silent, there was still the music, still Elvis's voice, still the piano under his hands, but the particular quality of noise that fills an arena when a crowd is excited and engaged, that changed. The crowd felt something shift. They didn't know what it was, but they felt it. In the wings of the stage, the musicians and crew who could see Elvis's face from the side understood something different. They understood that what they were watching was not performance. One of the musicians, in an interview given years later, said this, "I've played behind him for years. I know what Elvis looks like when he's giving the audience emotion. This wasn't that. This was something happening to him. I've thought about that night 1,000 times." I think he knew. The song ended. Elvis sat at the piano for a moment after the last note. Then he stood. He went back to the microphone. The show continued. He performed several more songs. He was professional. He was present. He gave the audience what they had come for, right to the end. But the musicians say that after the piano, after Unchained Melody, something was different. Not worse, not better, different, like a man who has said something out loud that he hadn't planned to say and cannot now unsay it. The concert closed with "Can't Help Falling in Love," as it always did. The closing song of every Elvis concert in those years, the signal that the show was ending, the gentlest possible goodbye. Wise men say only fools rush in. But I can't help falling in love with you. He sang it that night, with everything he had left. The musicians say the final performance of Can't Help Falling in Love on June 26th was one of the best versions they had ever heard from him. Stripped down in some way, direct, as though the filters that usually exist between a performer and their audience had been removed. When the last note ended, Elvis stood at the microphone for a moment in the dark of the arena, with 18,000 people around him. Then he walked off the stage. Backstage, he was quiet. The crew gave him space they had learned over the years when Elvis needed people around him, and when he needed the opposite. That night, he needed the opposite. He sat in the dressing room while the sound of the crowd still echoed through the arena walls. One of the musicians knocked on the door and asked if he was all right. Elvis said, "I'm fine." "Thank you." Then he said, "That was a good show." It was the last concert Elvis Presley ever gave. 7 weeks later, on August 16th, 1977, he was found at Graceland, He was 42 years old. The bootleg recordings from Market Square Arena that June evening have circulated among Elvis fans for nearly 50 years. People who have heard them describe the Unchained melody recording with consistent language. They say, "It sounds like something was ending." They say you can hear it in the voice, not the failure of the voice, not the decline, but something more specific and more human than either of those things. They say, "It sounds like goodbye." The people who were in that arena on June 26th, who were close enough to see his face when the tears came, they have talked about that night in interviews for decades. And what they say, consistently, is not that they knew what was coming, not that they saw death approaching a famous man and recognized it. They say something simpler and stranger than that. They say that in the moment when Elvis Presley stopped managing his face and let whatever was inside him come through in that moment, they felt something they had not felt at any of the other concerts. They felt him, not the king, not the performer, not the legend, just Elvis, the man. For one unguarded moment in an arena in Indianapolis on a June evening, 18,000 people got to see who he actually was. And what they saw was someone who was tired and grateful and full of love for them and aware of something they were not yet aware of. What they saw was someone saying goodbye. He just didn't say it in words. He said it. The only way he knew how. He sang it. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that the most honest moments are always the ones nobody planned, please subscribe and share it. Drop a comment below. Have you heard the bootleg recording from that final concert? And what song do you think of when you think of Elvis saying goodbye? The notification bell is right there. Ring it, because sometimes the most important things we say are the ones we say without knowing we are saying them.